It was a quiet Tuesday morning until the world shifted forever. Netflix released The Reckoning, and almost immediately, social media erupted like a volcano that had been simmering for decades. Notifications flooded phones, live streams ignited, and hashtags like number Diddy exposed, number The Reckoning 50, and number Tupac Truth Trend began trending across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Suddenly, everyone who had ever claimed to know the truth about Tupac's final days was either speaking out or being spoken for on a global stage. This wasn't just a documentary. It was history ripped open and exposed in real time. From the very first frame, viewers were hit with footage that had never been seen before. Time-stamped phone calls, shadowy surveillance clips, and intimate interviews painted a narrative that was impossible to ignore. This was not speculation, it was methodical, deliberate, and devastating documentation. Voices that had been silent for decades were now amplified, each testimony paired with clips showing Diddy in moments that directly contradicted previous statements. The editing was surgical, leaving no room for denial or distraction. Within minutes, the media scrambled to catch up. Journalists posted live reactions, breaking down every frame, analyzing every glance, every pause, and every whisper caught on camera. Former detectives and prosecutors were brought in, examining phone call timings and the placement of key figures in ways that made it clear. This was not just storytelling, it was a legal bombshell in motion. The truth once buried was now front and center, demanding attention. If you haven't seen The Reckoning yet, you need to watch it because every second could change the way you see history. Hit that play button now and witness the evidence the world is talking about. Fans, too, joined the frenzy. TikTok exploded with reaction videos. YouTube became a forum for breakdowns of the evidence, theory crafting, and heated debates. Every frame, every timestamp, every conversation was scrutinized. Social media had become a virtual courtroom, and the world was the jury. Public outrage mounted rapidly, especially after clips emerged showing Diddy making frantic calls, his voice tense, almost panicked. "If this gets out, I'm finished," he said in one of the leaked audio snippets, and the world collectively paused. People replayed it, dissected it, and shared it relentlessly. Meanwhile, legal experts began to weigh in on what this meant for the Tupac case. Many pointed out that if even a fraction of the new evidence were verified, it could open the door to reopening the investigation. Some suggested Diddy's prior statements could be re-examined under the lens of obstruction, concealment, and manipulation. Others warned that this could spark a cascade of legal consequences that would ripple through every corner of the music industry. Every passing hour added a new layer of intensity to a situation that was already spiraling out of control. By midday, it was impossible to ignore the storm. Clips of Diddy's interactions circulated relentlessly, with viewers noting the subtle tension in his voice, the pauses, the moments of visible discomfort. Comparisons were drawn to past interviews, and contradictions were highlighted in side-by-side posts. People analyzed body language, tone, and facial microexpressions frame by frame, debating in real time whether the footage indicated guilt, fear, or both. The online discourse became almost frenzied, with hashtags trending globally. Amid all this, the documentary did something far more significant than expose Diddy. It reclaimed the voices of those who had been silenced. Individuals who had lived in fear for decades suddenly felt empowered to share their experiences. Their statements, once dismissed or ignored, now carried undeniable weight. The narrative was no longer controlled by fame or money. It was dictated by the evidence itself. As evening approached, the intensity only grew. Analysts, commentators, and ordinary viewers began to speculate about the legal fallout. Would federal prosecutors act? Could Diddy face new charges or a reopening of the Tupac investigation? Would the music industry finally reckon with the shadow of past manipulation and silence? One thing was certain. The world had changed in a matter of hours. The stage was set for a confrontation that promised to be historic, with Diddy at the center and the documentary as the undeniable catalyst. By the end of the day, it was clear to everyone watching. The reckoning had shattered decades of silence, and the consequences were only beginning to surface. The next chapters wouldn't just unfold online, they would play out in courtrooms, legal filings, and global headlines. The truth had been unleashed, and no one would be able to ignore it. As the dust from the reckoning settled on social media, A far more serious storm was brewing behind closed doors. Lawyers, detectives, and music executives scrambled as the implications of the documentary sank in. By late morning, multiple law firms specializing in high-profile criminal cases had released statements acknowledging they were monitoring the situation closely. "We are evaluating the evidence," one attorney told reporters on the condition of anonymity. If verified, this could trigger unprecedented legal action. The Tupac case, long considered cold and unsolvable, suddenly loomed over Diddy like a shadow he could no longer outrun. The documentary meticulously traced events leading up to Tupac's final hours, cross-referencing phone records, eyewitness accounts, and surveillance footage. Every scene painted a web of connections, linking key figures in a network of secrecy, fear, and influence. The clarity was undeniable. For decades, truths had been buried under layers of fame, money, and intimidation. And now, those layers were being stripped away, frame by frame. News outlets, desperate to stay ahead, ran live updates, dissecting every scene, every snippet of audio. Legal experts appeared on TV panels, breaking down the evidence with precision. Each new analysis added pressure. "This isn't just a documentary," said one former prosecutor. "It's a blueprint for reopening an investigation. If authorities act, the consequences could be monumental, not just for Diddy, but for anyone who played a role in covering up events at the time." Inside the industry, the atmosphere was tense, almost paranoid. Record labels convened emergency meetings. Executives discussed potential fallout, damage control strategies, and how to respond if the legal system pursued Diddy. Artists close to him were silent, aware that even an innocent comment could be twisted in the media frenzy. Social media continued to amplify every rumor, creating a relentless feedback loop of speculation, outrage, and anticipation. Every news cycle seemed to escalate the pressure exponentially. Meanwhile, law enforcement quietly began reviewing leads that had gone cold years ago. Detectives reopened old files, revisited witness statements, and cross-checked the newly surfaced evidence against their own archives. Investigators who had long felt frustrated by the lack of cooperation in the original case now found themselves with a trove of verifiable information. "It's like a key finally turning in a lock," one retired detective said. "We can finally start connecting dots that were invisible before." Public reaction was both swift and intense. Supporters of Tupac hailed the documentary as a long overdue reckoning, a chance to finally seek justice for the late rapper. Meanwhile, Diddy's defenders scrambled to argue context, motive, and misinterpretation, but their voices were drowned out in a sea of viral clips, memes, and hot takes. Social media had transformed into a courtroom in real time, and the jury of public opinion was unforgiving. Every subtle gesture, hesitation, and facial expression was scrutinized, debated, and broadcast endlessly. By late afternoon, speculation had shifted from theory to inevitability. Sources close to the legal system hinted that federal authorities were quietly examining potential charges, though nothing had been officially confirmed. Every detail of Diddy's past interviews, business dealings, and interactions with known associates was suddenly under the microscope. Even casual observers noticed discrepancies in previous statements, contradictions that might now be interpreted as evidence of concealment or manipulation. As evening fell, the tension reached fever pitch. Lawyers, journalists, and fans speculated endlessly. Would Diddy be subpoenaed? Would his assets be frozen? Could this finally lead to accountability for the murky events surrounding Tupac's death? Every passing hour added urgency. The music industry, long accustomed to scandal, found itself paralyzed not because of gossip, but because the stakes were real, legal, and potentially life-altering. The world was watching. Analysts predicted that the next 24 hours could define Diddy's career and possibly reshape the narrative of one of the most infamous murders in music history. The line between entertainment and justice had blurred, and no one knew where the next revelation would come from. In the shadows, investigators and attorneys prepared for the inevitable confrontation that everyone knew was coming. One thing was undeniable. The storm unleashed by the reckoning was only just beginning, and the reverberations would echo far beyond the screen. As the documentary's echoes rattled through media outlets, Diddy remained uncharacteristically silent. Rumors swirled like wildfire, and sources close to him described a man under immense pressure, weighing every move with meticulous care. Lawyers, Publicists and personal aides worked around the clock, crafting responses, drafting statements, and preparing for any possible scenario. Yet, Diddy himself had not issued a public comment, fueling speculation that the storm was closer than anyone imagined. By late morning, social media had erupted into a frenzy. Fans, critics, and conspiracy theorists dissected every frame of the reckoning, debating its credibility and motives. Clips of Diddy from decades past resurfaced, analyzed for hidden meanings, gestures, and potential admissions. Hashtags demanding answers trended worldwide, with millions weighing in on what they now considered a monumental revelation. The narrative was no longer just about music. It had escalated into a high-stakes drama involving wealth, power, and one of the most iconic names in hip-hop history. Inside Diddy's mansion, the atmosphere was tense and controlled. Attorneys whispered in corners, reviewing timelines and corroborating alibis. Security teams monitored news outlets, tracking mentions of the case in real time. One insider described Diddy as calm on the surface but like a general preparing for battle underneath, calculating every next step to prevent the situation from spiraling into a legal nightmare. His team debated whether silence was a strategic shield or a liability, weighing the risks of an immediate denial versus letting the narrative unfold. Meanwhile, law enforcement quietly intensified their review. Federal investigators, previously hesitant to revisit cold cases without compelling evidence, now had a detailed, publicly available documentary that meticulously outlined alleged connections. Experts noted that the level of detailed dates, phone records, and eyewitness accounts was enough to justify serious inquiry. Detectives revisited the original Tupac case files, scrutinizing old testimonies and cross-referencing them with the new information. For some, the documentary had reopened doors they thought were permanently closed. The media, sensing a dramatic turning point, doubled down on coverage. Television anchors described Diddy's silence as eerily calculated, while podcasts and online platforms debated possible outcomes, from subpoenas to asset freezes. Analysts speculated that, even if charges were never filed, the reputational damage alone could be catastrophic. The public's appetite for accountability had reached a fever pitch, and Diddy's every public appearance was now under microscopic scrutiny. Even casual gestures or offhand comments could be interpreted as guilt or deflection. In private, those close to Diddy debated strategy. Should he hold a press conference, release a statement through social media, or continue to remain silent and let the narrative stabilize? Each option carried risk. A statement could be dissected and used against him, but silence could be perceived as an admission. Sources describe heated meetings where advisors argued fiercely over the next move. The tension was palpable, with every passing hour increasing the pressure on a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his empire. On the streets, fans and critics clashed over the implications of the documentary. Music forums exploded with debates, old rivalries reignited, and conspiracy theories spread with viral velocity. Every new detail from the film was analyzed repeatedly, with viewers cross-referencing facts against decades of previous coverage. Meanwhile, social media users began tagging law enforcement and celebrities, demanding action, creating a digital chorus that grew louder by the hour. The cultural impact was immediate, leaving the industry scrambling to respond to an unprecedented level of public engagement. Even celebrities and industry figures who once aligned themselves with Diddy expressed caution. Many avoided commentary altogether, aware that a misstep could entangle them in a legal and social media storm. The landscape had shifted overnight. No one was untouchable, and every connection, past or present, was suddenly under scrutiny. Business partners, collaborators, and former associates were quietly reviewing their own statements, wary of any potential fallout. As evening descended, tension reached a boiling point. Media speculation hinted that federal authorities might issue subpoenas or call witnesses. Rumors of frozen bank accounts and sealed indictments circulated, amplifying anxiety within Diddy's inner circle. The public waited with bated breath, eager for any statement or development. The question on everyone's mind, would Diddy finally break his silence, or was the storm only beginning to gather momentum? With the world watching and pressure mounting from every direction, one reality became undeniable. The reckoning had changed the game entirely. For Diddy, a man who had built an empire on image, influence, and control, there was no longer any room for error. Every choice now carried profound consequences. and the coming days would determine whether his legacy would survive the firestorm or be forever defined by the shadow of Tupac's final hours. As the heat from the reckoning continued to blaze, new voices began to emerge. Anonymous witnesses, emboldened by the documentary's revelations, came forward with information that had remained hidden for decades. Former associates, friends, and even rivals started contacting media outlets and investigators, offering accounts that painted a far more intricate web of connections than previously understood. Each statement, carefully verified, added layers to a story that many believed had been conclusively closed years ago. One former industry insider, who requested anonymity due to fear of retaliation, described late-night meetings and private conversations where Diddy allegedly discussed events surrounding Tupac's final months. The insider's account was detailed, noting specific dates, locations, and conversations that had never been publicly reported. Law enforcement sources confirmed that these leads were being taken seriously, with detectives quietly cross-referencing the information against old evidence and phone records. The meticulousness of the testimony left many stunned. It was clear that this was not mere speculation, but a potentially substantive contribution to an ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, the media continued its relentless coverage. Investigative journalists highlighted the newly surfaced statements, connecting them with the documentary's claims in a series of articles and broadcasts. Social media amplified every revelation, with fans and critics dissecting timelines, reviewing archival footage, and drawing conclusions in real time. The cultural impact was undeniable once again. Hip-hop's most prominent figures were at the center of a narrative that blurred the lines between music, history, and law. As the weeks passed, legal pressure began to intensify. Lawyers for Diddy scrambled to counter every new claim, filing motions to block certain publications and issuing statements denying the allegations. The legal maneuvers were strategic, but the courtroom drama had already spilled into the public arena, and no amount of damage control could erase the growing perception that Diddy was under serious scrutiny. Legal analysts predicted that the next months could include subpoenas, depositions, and even the possibility of formal indictments if the emerging evidence proved credible. The witnesses themselves became targets of public attention. Some were celebrated as brave truth-tellers, while others faced harassment, threats, and skepticism. Anonymous messages circulated online, warning witnesses to remain silent, while media outlets debated the veracity of each claim. The tensions surrounding these individuals mirrored the wider public frenzy, with social media users obsessively following every update and forums dissecting every nuance of testimony and documentary footage. Inside Diddy's circle, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Advisors debated whether to encourage potential witnesses to come forward in controlled statements or to attempt quiet negotiations to prevent further public disclosures. Every interaction was scrutinized, and trust became a precious commodity. Even longtime confidants were watched closely, as leaks could originate from any corner. The stakes were higher than ever, with reputations, financial empires, and personal freedom all on the line. The margin for error was minimal. In the legal sphere, investigators began piecing together phone records, travel logs, and financial transactions that appeared to corroborate witness statements. The emerging timeline suggested a level of coordination and planning that many had not anticipated. Analysts described it as a cold case heating up, noting that the combination of documentary footage, eyewitness testimony, and archival evidence could compel authorities to take unprecedented action against one of music's most influential figures. Across the industry, reactions were mixed. Some peers expressed shock at the resurfacing allegations, while others remained silent, wary of entanglement. Music executives, producers, and collaborators quietly reviewed their own past connections, aware that even peripheral involvement could have serious consequences. The environment of fear and uncertainty underscored a dramatic shift. No one was untouchable, and the ripple effects of the documentary had made every association, past or present, a potential liability. As the documentary continued to circulate and new evidence surfaced, public discourse became increasingly polarized. Fans argued about credibility and loyalty, while critics demanded accountability and transparency. Legal experts debated the likelihood of prosecution, noting that even without formal charges, the reputational damage could be irreversible. Meanwhile, Diddy's silence persisted, adding to the suspense and fueling speculation about the true scope of involvement and knowledge. By the end of part 4, it was clear that the story had entered a new phase. No longer confined to historical speculation, the case was actively evolving, propelled by witnesses, media scrutiny, and emerging evidence. The cultural and legal implications were profound. For Diddy, the narrative was no longer simply about defending a legacy, it was about navigating a high-stakes labyrinth of law, media, and public perception, where every move could have monumental consequences. The reckoning had ignited a chain reaction that showed no signs of slowing, and the world watched closely, anticipating the next explosive revelation. As the story escalated, the tension surrounding Diddy reached a fever pitch. Leaks began surfacing from previously silent sources. Documents, messages, and photographs appeared online, often anonymously, each suggesting a level of involvement that contradicted public statements made for years. These leaks, some verified and some disputed, reignited debates about the scope of Diddy's alleged knowledge of events surrounding Tupac's death. The public, already captivated by the reckoning, devoured every piece of information, analyzing every angle and cross-referencing every claim with old reports, interviews, and legal records. Media outlets amplified the chaos. Breaking news alerts, live-stream debates, and investigative segments flooded the airwaves. Each network vied for exclusivity, interviewing witnesses, former associates, and legal analysts, while social media exploded with commentary and speculation. Viral threads dissected timelines, scrutinized phone records, and compared statements from the documentary to historical footage. The sheer volume of attention made the situation unmanageable for Diddy's team, who faced not only legal threats, but also relentless public pressure and a torrent of judgment from fans and critics alike. Internally, Diddy's camp struggled to maintain control. Lawyers worked around the clock to file motions, attempting to block publication of sensitive leaks, while PR teams crafted statements aimed at minimizing reputational damage. Yet every effort seemed to backfire, as journalists highlighted the very motions as proof of a desperate attempt to suppress information. The narrative on social media grew more polarized. Some insisted on Diddy's innocence, framing the documentary as sensationalized and misleading, while others treated every emerging detail as evidence of a long-concealed conspiracy. Meanwhile, law enforcement quietly intensified their efforts. Investigators began reopening files, reviewing evidence with fresh eyes in light of the new statements and leaked materials. Surveillance footage, previously dismissed as irrelevant, was re-examined. Forensic experts revisited details that had been overlooked, and digital analysts traced online communications tied to individuals in Tupac's final days. Though no official charges had yet been filed, the cumulative pressure suggested that authorities were seriously considering whether a formal indictment could be justified, particularly if corroborating testimony continued to emerge. The leaks themselves were strategic, often timed to maximize exposure and public reaction. Certain messages and documents appeared on fan forums, while others were quietly circulated to investigative reporters who confirmed their authenticity before publishing. Each disclosure fueled further speculation, drawing in celebrities, industry veterans, and academics who offered their own interpretations. Analysts noted that the leaks were more than mere gossip. They were part of an orchestrated effort to challenge the official narrative and reignite public scrutiny of a case that had remained cold for decades. Public reaction became increasingly volatile. Fans of Tupac demanded justice, while Diddy supporters defended his legacy fiercely. Social media became a battleground, with threads, comment sections, and live-stream chats dissecting every detail. The conversation extended beyond music, spilling into debates about ethics, loyalty, and accountability in the entertainment industry. The cultural impact was undeniable. This was no longer just a criminal case. It had become a societal touchstone, forcing the world to confront the unresolved tensions surrounding one of hip-hop's most infamous events. Even within Diddy's inner circle, trust eroded. Advisors debated whether to encourage cooperation with authorities or to continue a strategy of silence. Allies who had once been loyal now weighed their positions carefully, knowing that any misstep could result in legal repercussions or public exposure. Financial analysts warned that brand partnerships and business ventures were at risk, as corporations grew wary of association amid the escalating scandal. Every interaction, every email, and every public appearance was scrutinized, heightening the sense of paranoia and urgency within Diddy's camp. As evidence and testimony continued to accumulate, patterns began to emerge that suggested possible coordination among individuals who had previously denied involvement. Investigators noted similarities in statements, overlapping timelines, and previously unseen interactions that painted a picture of a network far more complex than anyone had imagined. Legal experts speculated that, if substantiated, these findings could form the basis for serious charges, potentially exposing key figures to criminal liability. By the end of Part 5, it was clear that the situation had reached a critical juncture. The combination of leaks, media scrutiny, and emerging evidence had transformed a historical controversy into a live, high-stakes investigation. Diddy's legal team faced an unprecedented challenge, containing the narrative while navigating an environment where public perception and judicial scrutiny collided. Meanwhile, the public remained riveted, watching closely as the story continued to unfold, knowing that the next revelation could change everything. The final stretch of this unfolding saga brought Diddy face-to-face with the relentless consequences of public scrutiny and intensifying legal pressure. As authorities continued their quiet but thorough review of the case, sources close to the investigation indicated that investigators were now piecing together a web of connections that, if corroborated, could implicate multiple parties in the events surrounding Tupac's death. Every interview, text message, and previously overlooked document became a potential puzzle piece, and the momentum was building toward a point of no return. In the court of public opinion, the tension reached an apex. Social media platforms were ablaze with debates, theories, and viral posts dissecting every known detail. Online forums saw experts and fans dissect the minutiae of timelines and interactions, creating intricate diagrams linking Diddy to events he had long denied involvement in. Influencers and commentators repeatedly referenced the reckoning, quoting it and replaying clips to underscore alleged inconsistencies in Diddy's past statements. Every day brought a new wave of speculation, with hashtags trending that drew millions of users into heated debates. The scrutiny extended beyond music, spilling into lifestyle, business, and philanthropy, leaving no aspect of Diddy's public persona untouched. Legal experts weighed in, analyzing the possible ramifications. Some suggested that, while evidence of direct involvement remained circumstantial, patterns of communication and financial transactions could form the basis for formal charges if investigators deemed them sufficient. Others warned that the sheer visibility of the case increased the stakes dramatically. Public perception could influence prosecutorial decisions and jury opinions, making a courtroom battle not only a legal contest, but also a cultural spectacle. Lawyers close to the situation debated the best course of action, whether to continue a defensive posture or consider a strategy of cooperation that could mitigate risk. Meanwhile, allies and adversaries alike adjusted their positions. Longtime associates of Diddy watched carefully, assessing whether their continued support was wise. Industry executives reconsidered endorsements and partnerships, wary of the reputational fallout should allegations escalate. At the same time, those who had distanced themselves earlier now felt emboldened to speak, providing new perspectives and potentially actionable information. Every revelation, every corroborating detail, and every leak amplified the pressure, creating an environment in which even minor missteps could have far-reaching consequences. Investigative journalists intensified their coverage, following leads and interviewing sources who had remained silent for decades. Their work brought to light previously unknown interactions and financial dealings that hinted at a complex network of influence and concealment. Analysts drew attention to patterns that suggested coordination among individuals in positions of power, and commentators speculated on what might emerge should law enforcement succeed in unraveling the full scope of the operation. Each new disclosure, verified or not, added to the mounting tension, forcing Diddy's legal and PR teams to respond in real time while managing an increasingly hostile media landscape. As Part 6 progressed, the potential consequences became clearer. Charges, civil lawsuits, and financial repercussions all loomed on the horizon, but the situation was far from resolved. The narrative had shifted from speculation to tangible risk, and Diddy faced the possibility of a public reckoning that could redefine his legacy. The combination of decades-old controversies, newly surfaced evidence, and relentless public attention created an unprecedented storm, where every decision carried weighty implications for both his personal life and professional empire. The final scenes of this unfolding drama highlighted the human dimension of the story. Friends, family, and longtime collaborators grappled with the emotional toll of the scrutiny and the uncertainty surrounding the truth. The cultural impact of Tupac's legacy, intertwined with Diddy's role in the events leading to his death, underscored a generational reckoning with accountability, loyalty, and the ethics of influence. While the world waited for formal resolutions, the story had already reshaped conversations about fame, responsibility, and justice, leaving a lasting imprint on both hip-hop culture and the broader societal discourse. By the end of Part 6, the situation had reached a point of critical intensity. Investigators continued their methodical work, the media remained insatiable, and the public's fascination showed no signs of abating. Diddy, once untouchable in the realm of celebrity, now faced a reality shaped by the intersection of evidence, perception, and accountability. The saga surrounding Tupac's death, reignited by the reckoning, had transformed from a historical mystery into a live, high-stakes narrative that tested every dimension of truth, loyalty, and legacy.